Everyone knows that plyometrics improve your sprint speed, but many athletes don't know how to properly use them. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly which plyometrics to use, how to implement and progress them so you can maximize your sprint speed. Let's get right into it. So first things first, just quickly, to get the most out of your plyometric training, it's important to understand why they make you faster. So they train your fast twitch muscle fibers, which everyone knows is important for sprint speed and athleticism. Next, they improve your stretch shortening cycle function. Essentially, it leads to increased power, rate of force development, and joint stiffness, which is all important for sprint speed. And through the increase of this function, it decreases your ground contact time, so the less time spent on the ground in sprinting, the better. What a lot of people don't understand or don't realize is plyometrics are really good at improving the skill of sprinting. So that's what that skill transfer means. So on your acceleration days, you might do horizontal plyometrics, since acceleration is dominated by horizontal force application. So this is where your bounding gets really valuable. Or in top speed, the main force application is straight up and down vertical. And so that's where things like hurdle hops and depth jumps become really valuable. So just some rules to keep in mind. I would only limit plyometrics to 2 to 3 times per week max. And in most cases, I think 2 might be the best, because what you got to keep in mind is sprinting is a very high intensity plyometric itself. So if you're wanting to improve sprint speed, I'm assuming you're probably doing a lot of sprinting. And so you don't want to just tack on a bunch of plyometrics on top of that. So that's why I think 2 might be the sweet spot in most cases. Maybe earlier in the year when the intensities are low, you might be able to get away with 3. But then as you progress, I would probably only go to 2. And don't rush the progression through the plyometric phases I'm about to show you. Focus on mastering the skill, pulling your toes up and dorsiflexing your ankles prior to ground contact landing, and focus on the technique. So every plyometric that you do, you really want to emphasize the technique and doing it properly. So these are the main plyometrics that we use. We use pogo variations, both extensive and intensive. So extensive just means higher volumes, lower intensities. So 50% of your jump height in pogos on the spot, versus intensive is like max intensity you can go. You're trying to jump as high as possible while keeping the ground contact times as low as possible. We'll do vertical jumps in place. So this will be like tuck jumps, rocket jumps, deep squat jumps, all that kind of stuff. Broad jumps, you can do single, double, or triples. And then bounding, of course, everyone does bounding if they want to get faster. These include short bounds, so maybe only like 5 bound steps per rep, or vertical bounds, where the emphasis is quite literally vertical instead of how much distance you can cover. And then we have single leg bounds or single leg alternating bounds, extended bounds, and speed bounds. So extended is just for longer distances. Speed bounds is just focused on really reduced ground contact times. So for the more vertical oriented plyometrics, we'll use hurdle hops. We'll do both mini hurdle hops, like the small banana hurdles, and we'll do regular, just standard track and field hurdle hops as well. And then depth drops and drop jumps as well. These are the plyometrics we use in phase 1. Phase 1 is just focused on building the skill of plyometrics, the base of plyometrics, so plyometric volume, and your tolerance to plyometrics. So this is where we would use pogo hops and vertical jumps that I mentioned. So these are extensive, so low, very submaximal intensities, higher volumes. And again, you're just doing these to learn the skill of plyometrics, to learn that ground contact skill, because you want to learn that early before you start doing the more intense plyometrics, because A, you'll get more out of the plyometrics, and B, you'll get through them and stay a lot healthier. So with these, for both the vertical jumps and the pogo hops, we'll pretty much just do them in a circuit form with a lot of variety. So you might do like 5 to 10 exercises per plyometric circuit, and depending on the athlete level, we'll do 1 to 2 rounds of that circuit for about 10 to 30 seconds per exercise. So this might include like just standard pogo hops on the spot, crisscross pogos, lateral pogos, the vertical jumps, again, like tuck jumps, rocket jumps, lunge jumps. And then phase 2 plyometrics, this is where we get a little bit more specific. So once you build that base, you would kind of separate them into acceleration day plyos and top speed plyometrics. So you would do your short horizontal bounding on this day. On these days, we'll start very basic. So that would be broad jumps, the single, doubles, or triples, acceleration bounds. And what that is, it's pretty much just like a bound, but you're in more of a acceleration position versus like a upright bounding position, and you're really focused on applying aggressive forces into the ground. You can do standing triple jump and alternating bounds. Again, these are short, so you wouldn't do alternating bounds out to like 30 meters, but only maybe like a broad jump into 2 alternating bound steps per leg. And then on your top speed days in this phase, you would use vertical bounds. So vertical bounds, as you'll see on video here, just very easy, straight up and down. You can do static, where you jump, focus on sticking the landing, or you can do double or single leg forward, where it's repeated, and you can can do backwards, sideways as well. So for the vertical bounds here, the emphasis is on building the skill of, again, landing, but also when you do most plyometrics, you want to absorb the forces equally between your ankle, knee, and hip joints. You don't want to absorb the majority of the forces through any one specific joint, because that's how A, you end up with injury probably at that joint that's absorbing more of the forces, but then B, your performance isn't as good either because you're not making the most out of every single joint. So that's why we do the vertical bounds here, is to work on that. Phase 3 plyometrics, this is where your short bounds start to get a little bit more intense. So you might introduce your single leg bounding. So maybe you just do like broad jump into 4 bounds on one leg, and then you do the next rep 4 bounds on the other leg. Or you can do single leg alternating bounds where it's broad jump into left leg bound, and then switch right leg bound, all in the same rep. And then on your top speed day, you would introduce more hurdle hop type stuff. So what we would do is we would start with the mini hurdle hop, since it's typically less intense than the regular higher hurdle hops. And the variations include double, single leg, you can do forwards, backwards, sideways, and you can progress by increasing the spacing as well. So it actually increases the horizontal demand. So maybe at the start, you might start with like 2 feet between each mini hurdle, and then you can increase that to 3 feet, 4 feet, and you can do mazes as well. So what a maze is you might do all in the same rep, like 2 forward, 1 lateral. So mixing in like lateral, backwards, forwards, all in 1 rep. And then once you get more comfortable and more efficient over time, you can progress the height of the hurdle hops. So you can get into the regular higher hurdle hops. And with these, we would just do standard double leg. We would do some lateral stuff too. We probably wouldn't do backwards. We wouldn't do single leg. A good way to start actually is to do the static hurdle hops, what I mentioned in the vertical bounds. So where you just jump, land, and then you're really emphasizing absorbing the landing equally between your ankle, knee, and hip joints. And then once you get proficient at that, you can just go into the repeat hurdle hops. And then phase 4 plyometrics. So on your acceleration days, you could add in speed to the plyometrics. So if you look at the phase 3 here, typically what I would do is, or phase 2 even as well, typically what I would do for all these bounding variations is they would all start from a broad jump. So the standing triple jump would just be broad jump into right leg, land, or the alternating bounds would be broad jump into right, left bounds. But then in this phase, you might add in some speed. So you might do like a 5-step run or a 5-step jog into the alternating bounds, into the single leg bounds, the single leg alternating, because that added momentum and speed really increases the demand on the plyometric. So that's a way to progress it. But also, you don't necessarily want to rush through the progression. You want to focus on mastery of the plyometrics because there is a skill component to it. So you might not even be ready for the added speed variations depending on what athlete you are. You might still be working through the previous plyometrics for your short bounds, which is perfectly fine. You want to squeeze as much gains as possible out of the plyometrics along the way rather than just rushing to the end of the progression, because A, it'll help you avoid injury, but then also B, you'll just get more out of it. You'll get more improvement. And then so on the top speed day, you're introducing the really intense stuff like depth jumps, where you can just do like a regular depth jump where you land, try and jump as high as you can, or you're doing it onto or over an obstacle. So you can do it land, try and jump onto a box of a certain height, or land, jump over a hurdle. And you can also do horizontal too, where you land and then you're going into a standing land into a long jump. So these are all ways to add variety, complexity. And drop jumps, you can do those same variations if you're keeping ground contact times really low, because the difference between drop jumps and depth jumps is kind of about finding that balance between jump height but ground contact time, whereas drop jumps is pretty much just your only focus on reducing your ground contact times. So again, you can do those variations if your ground contact times are staying to a minimum. On top speed days, you can do extended and speed bounds. So before it was all about the short bounds, you're only doing it for like 4 or 5 steps or bound steps per rep, but here you might go to like say 30 meters, 40 meters for the extended bounds, and that would be like alternating single leg alternating. And then speed bounds is the same thing. For the speed bounds, you're going at a little bit longer distances than you would for the short bounds, but you're really emphasizing minimal ground contact times, because sprinting is such a short ground contact time. It's like 0.08 to 0.12 seconds spent on the ground in top speed. So with the bounds, or with the speed bounds particularly, it's not necessarily about how much height or distance you can cover per step, but it's really about how little time you can spend on the ground. And the extended and speed bounds you can actually do on acceleration day. They're not exclusive to top speed days, but keep in mind in phase 4, you probably wouldn't only do depth jumps, drop jumps, extended, and speed bounds, because they are all very intense. So you might do like depth jumps and drop jumps once per week, and then on the other plyometric day, if you're doing 2 plyometric sessions per week, you might just do more basic, easier on your body plyometrics like the broad jumps, the triple broad jumps, or just the short bound, the very easy short bounds, like from the broad jump stance, or if you're doing extended and speed bounds on that week, again, you probably wouldn't do the depth jumps and drop jumps on the other day. You might just do like vertical bounds, mini hurdle hops, or high hurdle hops too. So it's one of those things you have to manage when you're in phase 4. Don't necessarily only do phase 4 plyometrics just because the intensity is so high. If you enjoyed these kind of videos, consider subscribing down below. I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching.